Hey, it's Kate, and I'm sitting on a toilet here in Berkeley, California. I'm at my friend's house and recording this recipe for disaster before I go to the Conscious Business Network. Sort of a fun interlude. So, recipe for disaster. Let's talk about what's happening this time of year, change of seasons. I've been talking to a few friends who've like, I have this horrible cold, and I got this horrible sore throat, or my allergies are so bad, or geez, my kids just brought home the flu. And let's look at what's happening here. Let's look at what happens before the disaster, because they all have a common theme. And the common theme is that we're more susceptible at change of seasons. Why? Well, because change is in the air. And when we ignore that change is in the air, we are setting ourselves up for disaster. So let's just break it down blow by blow and see what's happening here. So usually the first signal in a recipe for disaster is that you'll get the food blahs. You'll go through a phase where you don't know what to eat. You're like not really hungry for what you're normally hungry for. For many people, this looks like they've been eating salad all summer, and all of a sudden they're like, I cannot eat another salad. No. But they don't know what to eat. And so what happens is often because their patterning is set up in eating or ordering salads or making salads or whatnot, is they generally will then eat the salad, but their body is saying like, no more salad. And their digestive fire is busy. It's like busy doing other things, which is why it's not sending a strong signal to eat. And so it feels like I'm not really hungry for anything. But what do we often do? Well, one of my friends described it as this. She's like, well, it was my daughter's birthday, and we don't normally eat ice cream, and my daughter wanted to eat an ice cream. It was her birthday, and I thought, well, it'd be so nice to have an ice cream with my daughter, even though I'm not hungry for ice cream. And then what happened? Disaster. Yep, you guessed it. Full-blown, like sore throat, horrible, like full body aches for not like a day, but for days. And we're thinking like, one ice cream cone? But it wasn't one ice cream cone now, was it? Like usually there's subtle signs and symptoms before the one ice cream cone, and the one ice cream cone is the tipping point. And the tipping point, it doesn't even have to be an ice cream cone. It could just be like a meal that's just a little bit too heavy. It could be a meal that's a little too raw. It could be getting a little too cold, right? Stressing the physical body out just a little too much, when all systems are in a much more delicate, sensitive mode. Change of seasons is dominated by the energy of Vata. Vata literally means transform. It means like this. It means the wind, and it's like the winds of change, right? Or what are happening. So when that is the dominant energy in our external environment, it's also the dominant energy in our internal environment. If we're going through any sort of, stressful time, like if we just have a little bit more going on in work, or a little bit more going on in relationships or emotionally, or there's a death or something horrible, an accident has happened, we're going to be even more sensitive to the winds of change. So the first thing that we'll notice, the first part of the recipe for disaster, has a lot to do with, honestly, with not observing what's happening in your palate, not honoring that your palate is changing, that you have the food blahs, you stay in the same food pattern, or you eat something that's just a little bit too heavy, too cold, not quite right. So the inverse there is when you have the food blahs is just go to something like broth, like juices, broths, and you might think like, oh, that sounds a little bit like a detox. And like, yes, indeed. That's why we do the detox, the yogi detox, every time there's there's the massive change of seasons in the spring and in the fall, because we just pare it down so we can listen, so we can feel. What's the body trying to do this time of year? Well, in the northern hemisphere, if we're going from summer into fall, we're eliminating stored heat from summer, we're lubricating the channels, right? Which channels? Particularly the digestive, the respiratory, and then the mind channels. You could say like the nervous system channels, but in Ayurveda, it's the Manovahashrota, it's the mind carrying channels. If you're some southern hemisphere going into summer right now, your body wants to eliminate stored congestion from winter and refresh the channels for a cool and easy summer. So if we don't do that, we're Recipe for disaster. Okay, so the recipe for disaster is really pretty simple. Ignore that your palate's changing. Add in a night or two of poor sleep so that you run yourself down a little bit. Add a pinch of stress, right? Any kind will do. Overscheduling yourself works every time. And then add a handful of congestion or constipation, your choice. Right. And then we know that we're going to have a full-blown disaster on our hands. I hope you're entertained by this. I hope you feel empowered by knowing that your food blahs are there to inform you, that they're intelligent. They're there to help you make a smart choice and a better basically transition from one season into the next season. Because that's really what it's all about. It's all about being conscious, about noticing you're always changing. It's all always changing. And the more aware you are of today I don't feel like eating much. That's a big hint. Don't eat much, right? Or wow, now I'm really hungry. I think I'll have some great roasted vegetables with some miso soup. Fantastic, you're on the right track. And the other night, I started to notice I really don't want anything. So I just had broth and some sauerkraut. And I felt great the next day. And I had been getting a little bit of congestion, and the next day it was gone. I had a little bit of ginger into my broth, and that was enough. So if we're really attuned, we'll notice this and we won't fall into a disaster. Now, if this sounds good to you and you're wow, I need to pay more attention, join our next Yogi Detox. We start October 12th. We rock the detox. We're going to do this whole process of external decluttering as we're doing our internal decluttering. It's a 3-month expedition. All over the world join in, and we have a tremendous transformation in the connection together. All right, so go to yogidetox.com.